And with that, I would like to turn to our next speaker. And we'll hear briefly from everyone and then get into the main presentation itself. So Telma Carvalho, I'd like to really thank you for joining us today from the European Research Council Executive Agency. If you don't mind briefly introducing yourself and what the ERC Executive Agency does, we'll then turn to our great grantees and then return to you to hear more about the grants from top to bottom. So thank you so much, Telma.
Thanks, Jackson. Hello, for us it's good afternoon, but for you it's probably good morning. My name is Telma Carvalho. I work for the European Research Council Executive Agency. So we are the operational arm of the Scientific Council, and we actually organize all the evaluations, the calls for the proposals. We organize the evaluations of the proposals. We manage signing contracts between our grantees, the host institutions, and the European Commission, and we also follow the projects during their lifetime. And on top of that, we also do lots of communications with our stakeholders, advertising like today, what are the opportunities we have, as well as communicating the results that we obtain. I'm from the domain of physical science and engineer. I'm an engineer by training, and I work for the Synergy scheme. I coordinating the panel evaluating proposals on computer science and engineering. Thank you.
So with that, I might ask Osvaldo Simeone, is one of our first of the three grantees today, to briefly just introduce yourself and your research background.
Yes, it's a pleasure to be here. My name is Osvaldo Simeone. I'm a professor of information engineering at King's College London. My background is engineering. I work on top fields like information theory, machine learning, AI, quantum computing, and neuromorphic computing. Previously, prior to joining King's, I was in the States. I was at NJIT, the New Jersey Institute of Technology. And in fact, it's thanks to an ERC grant that I moved to, let's call it Europe, to London. And so I'm particularly happy to be here and support the ERC.
Thank you so much. Dr. Jonas Pontusson, I might ask you the same.
Hello, I'm also very pleased to be here. My name is Jonas Pontusson. I am Swedish of origin. I am currently a professor of political science at the University of Geneva, and I spent the biggest part of my life and my academic life in the US. I did my undergraduate at Amherst College. I did my PhD at Berkeley. I spent 20 years at Cornell University, and I finished up with 6 years at Princeton before I moved here in 2010. And I had an ERC that I applied in 2016 and got it, or started the project in 2017, and it ran for 6 years, called Unequal Democracies.
Thank you very much. And then Dr. Poksh, I'll ask you to close out.
Yeah, also a pleasure to be here. So like my two colleagues, I also have a background in the US. So I did my PhD at UCLA and then initially worked at McGill in Canada. And I'm now a professor of political science at the University of Cologne, mostly working on questions of European politics, political representation, and democracies. And yeah, happy to be here today and answer all your questions that you have.
Thank you so much. So just as a reminder for the format then, we will have a lengthy presentation by Telma about the ERC grants themselves, and we'll be pausing at various points to take the content she's presenting and ask the feedback, opinions, and experiences of our three great grantees. So Telma, if I can ask you to share your screen and begin your presentation, we'll be very thankful. And again, I'll just ask the audience to hold off on most questions because I think Telma and the grantees will have a lot of insights that will answer your questions.
Okay, then. So thank you once more for having me here to let you know about the funding opportunities for overseas researchers. My presentation will have different points, and we have seen now in the polling that there was not a lot of knowledge about ERC, so I will start by telling you in few words what ERC is about. I will talk about the schemes that we have, the granting schemes, the eligibility rules associated to some of them and to the process. I will tell you about the evaluation process, provide you some tips. We say some tips, but no tricks, and give you some information on the US participation or overseas participation. So just to put ERC in the context, so we are within the framework of funding that is managed by the European Commission. It is called Horizon Europe, is a funding framework with a duration of 7 years. It is structured in three pillars. We are part of the first pillar, excellence, and we have a total of 16 billion that we have to spend during those 7 years. So what is really, really special about ERC is that behind this program, there is a set of scientists that they themselves are well-recognized scientists in their respective fields of research, and they define the strategy. So what does this mean? They actually define how they want to spend their money. So all the grants you have heard about, like the starters, the consolidators, the synergy grants, those are all decisions made by the Scientific Council because they define the rules for those grants as well as how the evaluation is made. So we have a president, Maria Leptin, that she works in close collaboration with the vice presidents. Each of the vice presidents belongs to one of the domains, so life sciences, social science and humanities, and physical science and engineering, but they come regularly together to discuss aspects of the program. So as I already had the opportunity to say, I am working for the European Research Council Executive Agency. This is the operation arm of ERC. We actually are in the background making sure that everything that is decided is actually delivered. So let me start this by reading literally what is the mission of ERC. So to encourage the highest quality research in Europe through competitive funding and to support investigators-driven frontier research across all fields on the basis of scientific excellence. So if you just look to our mission statement, you already have a lot of important features of what ERC is about. So it tells you that we are funding investigators, so we are funding people, we are funding excellent ideas, that we only use excellence as a way to assess those ideas, and that the program is totally bottom up. So those are very, very special features from our program. So the freedom of research is something that some time ago came a little bit under attack, and because of course the European Commission is very attentive to what is happening in the world. On the 5th of May, actually, our president, President von der Leyen, launched an initiative called Choose Europe for Science. And in this process, ERC, together with other parts of the framework, and actually other parts of the budget of the European Commission, they decide to put forward some initiatives so that we could indeed support this program of Choose Europe for Science. So in this attempt, the Scientific Council immediately decide to take an action. And for example, at the time this was announced, our call for Advanced 25 was still running, and immediately they decided everybody that was working outside the European Union or an associated country would have the right to ask 2 million of extra funding instead of 1 million that was there. So this was an immediate reaction to support this initiative, Choose Europe for Science, but also the Scientific Council decided to create a new scheme that is called ERC Plus, and that we are actually discussing, or the Scientific Council is actually discussing how this, what is the target audience for this grant, how this grant is going to be evaluated. So what we can tell you about this grant is that is 7 years, is a duration of 7 years, and we'll have 7 million maximum as the total budget that can be claimed. So the time frame for this is, in principle, this call is going to be published on in June 27. Is going to be evaluated. It will have 2 steps. It will be evaluated in November, and the second evaluation comes sometimes during spring. So before summer or early summer 28, the results of this call will be in principle known. So everything I said, those are tentative deadlines. So why should you then apply for an ERC grant? Because what we see is then, and you will hear the testimonies of our grantees. ERC grants provide independence, recognition, and visibility. So you can pick up the topic you want to work. You can work with whoever is in the world. You have all the freedom to engage and pick up your team members, your collaborators. You have financial autonomy. For a long time, our grants are rather generous. I will tell you in a minute what are the maximum amounts associated to each scheme. And also a very special particularity of the grants is that they are portable. What does this mean? It means that if you are not happy with the conditions offered by the host institution to deliver your project, you always have the possibility to look for another host institution to continue delivering your project. So portability is something really very unique from our grants. And what we see is that the ERC, having an ERC grant acts as a kind of a quality label, and this makes it easier for you to get extra funding, and you have recognition by the scientific community. Back to you, Jackson.
Thank you very much. So I might start by giving a quick softball question to our grantees and just ask how you first learned about it, because the answer to that question might be similar or different to the audience members today, who some of them are learning about this for the first time. So if I can start with you, Osvaldo, and then I'll ask the same question to someone else.
Yeah. Yes, in my case, it was word of mouth. I was working in the States, as I mentioned earlier, and I had in particular a friend, a colleague, collaborator who was working in Europe at the time, and he was telling me about his attempts to to obtain an ERC grant, eventually successful, and essentially he listed all the benefits that Thelma just mentioned. So in particular, the focus on research excellence, the fact that this is a type of project that is per researcher, that focuses on the specific researcher, the fact that it gives you financial autonomy. And in my case, there was also the additional fact that coming from outside, I would have obtained, being granted the possibility to ask for a larger budget. So this is how I heard about the ERC.
And Jonas, if I may, I'd like to ask you the same question.
I'm not sure I had heard of ERC grants before I moved to Europe, or certainly hadn't thought about applying for them. But once I was here, it was pretty obvious, a kind of a no-brainer in a certain way. I think among people in my discipline, at least, this is the grant that one would want to get, both because of the recognition, but also, and importantly, and this is implicit in everything that Thelma was saying, the flexibility that it affords. I mean, by comparison to other EU grants, which almost always have to involve consortia and lots of different people from different countries, and which typically have very clear sort of deliverables, which you have to identify in advance, and you have to meet those deliverables. This is a much more flexible and more research-oriented, centered project, I think, where people can change their program over time and engage with others in a much more flexible way. So it was pretty obvious from the get-go, or within a year of having gotten here, that what one should aim for was in my case, an advanced ERC.
And I might just add to that. I know Thelma has underscored this in her early slides, but although the geographic range is Europe, not just EU member states, but countries that are associated to Horizon Europe, or at least Pillar 1 of Horizon Europe, but for all nationalities. So I wouldn't want anyone in the audience to assume that based on whatever passport they hold, they wouldn't be eligible, as long as you're willing to carry out your 5 to 6 year, or starting next year, 7-year research project in the wider European area. Your nationality does not matter. So then, Sven-Oliver, I might turn to you and ask a slightly different question: how you knew you were ready to apply, or how you felt, how you best prepared yourself to make your proposal.
Yeah, so I applied 2 years after I moved back from Canada to Germany, and at that point I was still eligible for the Consolidator grant, so that's a grant before the advanced grant, and it was a good time to start thinking about setting up a larger research team for myself, and I think that the grant really sort of appealed to me. In addition, I was lucky to have quite a bit of support from my host institution that essentially was very proactive in encouraging scholars and researchers to consider the grant scheme. Yeah, and then at that point, I was at the last year of being eligible for the Consolidator grant, and then submitted the application, was successful.
Thank you. I think before we move on to Telma's next slides, I might just ask the other two grantees if you have anything you want to add about sort of in the same line as Sven Oliver, how you started your process. You learned about it, you knew it was what you wanted to do. Was there a certain order of operations to contacting host institutions or speaking to colleagues and peers? Open-ended question if you'd like to take it or not.
I can take the question maybe. So I think my situation was a bit different because at the time when I decided to apply, I was on sabbatical at the European institution, and so I liked where I was, and I thought that I maybe would like to stay a bit longer, and so I thought of the ERC as an opportunity to do that, and so my choice of the host institution was natural since I was visiting as for a sabbatical period. The way I started is this may make sense for you in the States. I had several drafts for NSF proposals that I planned to submit at some point, and I noticed that all these different proposals had like a unifying theme, and so eventually I decided to write a single ERC proposal, distilling all these three different strands into a unifying theme. And that's what made the final proposal that was granted. Again, also in my case, it was a Consolidator grant.
Okay, then. So this slide, you see all the schemes that we currently have, and the one that I already talked about, the ERC Plus, that is under discussion on how this is going to be finally advertised to the community. So what you can see here is that indeed we have three different schemes that allow supporting our researchers throughout their careers. So we start with a starter, and that as an eligibility window associated to it. So it is for researchers that defend successfully their PhD between 2 and 7 years ago. This as a maximum of 1.5 million, and you have 5 years to implement your project. Then if you move in the career development line of researchers, we also support researchers that are actually consolidating. In some cases, they already have their teams. Other cases, they do not. But they already defend their PhD successfully between 7 and 12 years ago, and their budget is slightly bigger. So they will have a maximum budget of 2 million, and then also the same time window to implement their project. And then finally, of the advanced grant, where there is no eligibility window associated to it, but those grants are dedicated to researchers that are already established research leaders in their field of research. So they already have a solid track record of research achievements, and those are the biggest grants for as an individual grant. So we have 2.5 million. The difference also of this grant in relation with the other two that I just talked about is that this is a lump sum. So it just means that those grants are easier to be administered by the host institutions because they do not have to provide any evidence on how the money is spent. Instead, we are looking to the outputs, and we pay as the outputs are being achieved, while for starters and consolidators, as well as synergy, we say in our jargon, we pay against real costs. So the costs need to be justified. So for the synergy grants, this is something different. We don't talk about consortium. What we have in a synergy grant is a group of PIs that they can, between 2 and 4 PIs, and they work together. Those grants are really very, very special in the sense that you need to have a group of people that is very unique, working to try to tackle a very ambitious and complex research problem. Those grants have a maximum of 10 million and are to be implemented because those grants are even more challenging than the individual grants. There is 1 year extra to implement those grants. Those grants also have a particularity. They are truly open to the world in the sense that wherever researcher in the world is able to participate in those grants, with a big difference that is this researcher does not have to move to Europe or an associated country to be able to work with European researchers or researchers established in associated countries. So this is, you are able to stay where you are. There was a question along those lines. So if you go for a synergy grant where you are working with researchers in Europe, with 1 researcher up to 4 researchers in total, and your grant is awarded, you can carry out your research in the United States or Canada, where you are. While if you apply for the grants I just talked before, those require that you move into Europe and you spend at least 50% of your time in Europe. So, but very important for you, if you do that, you can still keep your affiliation. So ERC is not about a brain drain, but we are in fact in favor of, and what we really aim to is to have researchers from other parts in the world that have a specific knowledge that they come and they work with Europeans to be able to transfer the knowledge into Europe or in associated country. On top of that, we also have the proof of concept. Those are small grants. They are also lump sum grants, and they are just, they can be given to and only to ERC grant holders. So you can have as many as you can. You can only have 1 running at the time. And the idea here is to exploit the marketability of your innovation. So this is the POC grants. So I was already telling you about the synergy and the special features that synergy have. So I was telling that you have a group of PIs, not a consortium, a group of PIs that they together have a very unique know-how. This is the know-how that is needed to tackle this ambitious research problem. It is important to let you know that this problem that they are trying to tackle, it does not need to be transdisciplinary or interdisciplinary. You can have a very complex issue to be solved in a specific area, and you have, when you write those grants, you have to explain what is the knowledge that the group of PIs have that will allow delivering the breakthroughs that would not be possible to be delivered if they would be working in isolation. So all PIs have exactly the same rights and obligations, even if there is what we call in our jargon a corresponding PI. Is just a PI that with whom the agency takes contact. It is also important to say that when you go for synergy grant, it does matter what is your career stage. You can have starters working with advanced people, or can be all starters. But we expect a very high level of commitment of the group to deliver this project. So truly open to the world, as I already explained. You do not need to move in Europe to be able to work with our European counterparts. In terms of the, I just told you about the amounts associated to each of the schemes. I told you that there was 1 million that you could ask extra. Initially, this 1 million need to be to correspond to a certain cost category. This was abolished in the work program 26, you can now ask 1 million extra to the maximum amount associated with a certain scheme if you just justify why you need this money. Again, what I just mentioned at the beginning, and in order to support the Choose Europe for Science, everybody that is located outside the EU or an associated country has the possibility to ask 2 million. So let's make a very concrete example. You are an advance, you have the profile to be an advanced grantee. You know that the maximum amount of money is 2.5 million. If you are outside, you are eligible to design a project for 4.5 million to be used within 5 years with recruiting the people that you think are the best, regardless where they are in the world. Okay, then, but of course, you also heard that this is a competitive scheme. So when you enter this, you should really be prepared. It's tough competition. So it is normal that before you embark in such a process, you ask some questions to yourself, like, why is my project important? What is it, am I going to have results that will go substantially beyond the state of the art? Why am I the best person? Was this tried before? It didn't work. Why am I the person to make it happen now? Am I able to work independently? Very important. And to manage a 5 years project with a substantial budget? So those are all questions that you should ask yourself before you embark in such a process. What we hear, and probably this will also be mentioned by our grantees that are here with us, lots of our grantees actually, they tell us embarking in writing a proposal for ERC helps you planning your career on the long term. It just helps you seeing where you want to be in 10 years time. So back to you, Jackson.
Thank you. I might build on the slide you're leaving us on right now, Telma, and then also where we left off with the insights of the others, and just ask Jonas if I can share this one with you. Just you said your research background, how you learned about the grants, and then if you can transition to advice, how you would best recommend a prospective applicant prepare and mature their proposal.
Yeah, yes, I guess there's a couple of things I would say. One is coming up with the right concept in some sense, and I think several people have already mentioned this, and at least in my case, it was very much about trying to say, this is what I've been working on, and here is something new. It relates to what I have been working on, but it's new in a variety of ways. And I played a lot in my one application successful on the fact that I had connections in the US and that there was a debate in American political science which hadn't really translated into the Europe yet, and which was in the US somewhat limited for the lack of a comparative perspective. So I was sort of promising that that there was a network of people in the US that we could talk to and bring to conferences, and at the same time, we would bring something to this debate about sort of who is being represented in democratic systems that was missing from the US. So the kind of cross-Atlantic discussion was an important part of what I was doing, what I was proposing to do, and I think based on reviews, what people liked about my proposal. I would also emphasize, I guess, that I would hesitate if you don't already have fairly good contacts in the European host institution that you are proposing to go forward with. The application does involve the host institution in a whole variety of ways, and I got a lot of feedback about what my proposal. I got a lot of help putting together a tentative budget for the proposal. And the one problem, I had a great time with both applying, because it helped me, as Telma says, set my agenda and so on, and doing the project. The biggest problem I had was that in my proposal, there was a cross-country survey, and there were some survey experiments, and I did not anticipate the number of ethics problems that I needed to present to the European. So my proposal was accepted, conditional on answering a whole bunch of very technical ethics questions about these surveys. And my university at that time did not have any legal person with ethics competence. So in order to satisfy the ERC on this score, we had to hire a lawyer, and this became from outside, and this lawyer tried to get as much money as he could from the University of Geneva. So this became, there was like a 6-month period. I had my grant, but I needed to respond to this stuff, and my home institution was not prepared to help me with that. So I think that sort of knowing the home institution and knowing that they are on board and that they have previously done ERC proposals, and this was at a kind of moment when the regulations concerning privacy were relatively new, and my guess is that most European universities are now up to snuff on this front. But I think it's important to realize that there is a whole bunch of aspects. So coming up with the concept, that's my problem, but there is a whole set of practical, I'm not sure, administrative is not the right word for it, but there's a set of things that you are going to need a home institution or host institution to help you with.
It sounds like there's maybe, and Telma has mentioned this or can elaborate on this further, the dynamic of the host institution is intimately involved from the beginning. I mean, from before you even finalize your proposal. But at the same time, I'm aware of the concept of the portability of the grants. So if you find certain conditions are just not working out, you take your grant with you. And there are many funding schemes where that's not the case, where you simply have to walk away and just end everything there if it doesn't work. So maybe that will spur some discussion during the Q&A. You mentioned that 6-month period with that specific sort of legal issue. If you had to play devil's advocate, could you put a length of time from your original idea and thinking you might apply to submission or to feeling that your idea had reached maturity?
12 months.
Okay. I'm sure also I'll, with the asterisk, with the sort of caveat of this will be very different case by case, each person, but I think people want to hear real anecdotes and stories. So thank you for sharing that. Maybe I'll just
just one thing very, very quickly. Also, I think, so there is an issue of administrative support or university institutional support, but I think there's also sort of colleagues in my department played a very important role, or colleagues in my faculty played a very important role in sort of helping me frame the thing. And I don't think had I been at a U.S. university when I was doing the application, I think I might have ended up framing it in a less effective way, perhaps. Or talking to other people who've had ERC grants was very useful.
Well, I guess you're paying it forward, so thank you for being here today. So Naller, I might ask you just a targeted copy of the question I asked Jonas, if you can share maybe how long from idea to maturity or idea to proposal for your project.
Yeah, I think it was not quite 12 months. It was about 9 months in my case. And I would like to reiterate that it's, of course, that is slightly dependent also on the kind of support you can have from the host institution. So I think it's very important to be able to identify, in particular when you come probably from outside of Europe, a host institution that can help you in preparing some of the technical details of their grant, such as putting together a credible budget. These might be some things that might require some time. So I think when you approach a host institution, I think having somebody, a grant manager, they usually have them, who is really dedicated to your preparation of the proposal, that can be quite useful. But I would like to quickly add, I think in terms of the overall proposal, such as on the slide here. So I've been both an applicant, but I've reviewed several of these applications in the past. And I think convincing the panel in a way that both you pitch a new idea. So it's not necessarily what you've done in the past, but you bring in a new perspective, like Jonas mentioned. And also in my case, that was the same case. I sort of like did propose something that built upon the work that I've done, but also tried out new, more risky things in the proposal. I think that's quite important, but you have to really demonstrate that you are the person to do it. So this credible track record that you're also then being able to implement this in terms of publications, I think is quite important. But you're also talking to an audience in the panel, to reviewers that might not be exactly your field of specialization. So I think pitching the idea to close colleagues, trusted colleagues, maybe also people that are slightly outside of your individual field. For example, organizing a small workshop during the grant preparation phase can be quite effective and quite useful. And I should maybe mention that in the proposal, this 5-year perspective really gives you a longer period to ask a question than a normal grant phase, at least that we have in other grants in Europe. And so that also changes the kind of question that you ask. It can be a little bit bigger, a little bit more risky, a little bit more fundamental, at least from a social science perspective than what we usually do. And I think that's also really a nice perspective and aspect of the ERC grants.
And then if anyone wants to chime in or add on anything someone else has said, please do. But I might think to close this section, Osvaldo, and ask, elaborating on what the others just said, how did you either find your host institution, or how did your relationship with them evolve? I mean, for people starting at square one, whether they're in Europe or they're outside of Europe, what's your advice to them, or how did your experience go?
Yeah, so unlike the other two grantees, I was in the States when I wrote the proposal, and although I was visiting as on sabbatical at a European institution, so I did receive some support from the host institution, but because I was not affiliated with that university at the time, support was relatively limited. I did receive a lot of support from previous grantees whom I happen to know, and they provided me with budget examples and proposal templates or examples of successful proposals and so on. So my support was more related to my colleagues and collaborators than the institution itself. In fact, what happened to me is that after I was granted the project, I decided to move from the US to Europe. And at that time, what happened is that the original host institution essentially was not able to offer a suitable position. And so I ended up moving. And because, as Thelma said, this type of grant is portable, so I ended up joining a different institution and moving my grant there.
And then for your original institution that you made the application with, was this one you were previously affiliated with before moving to the US, or had you just reached them with no previous connection?
I was there on sabbatical, so I just applied for a sabbatical position. I was there on sabbatical, and while there, I asked them if I could submit an ERC grant with them as the host institution. They agreed, and but then when the time came to make a specific offer in terms of the position I would have while I was carrying out the project, that did not turn out as I expected, and so I had to move the project at a different institution.
Thank you.
If
there's nothing else, perfectly. What I think I can do is all four of our great speakers are generously sharing their time from Europe. So thank you for being here for your evening. Osvaldo, I understand you have to leave in a few minutes. So what I might do is ask you just to review while Thelma continues her presentation, any of the open questions in the Q&A box in case you see a question or two that a grantee perspective might be relevant, and then you're welcome just to type your answer and then leave as you have to. I'll also be going through and adding my own responses to whatever questions I can. So if there's nothing else to add for this section, Osvaldo, I want to thank you while you're on screen, and I look forward to continuing to hear from the other three. So Thelma, please take it away if there's nothing else.
Yeah, okay then. So this slide just tells you how the evaluation is done. So we already said that excellence is the only criteria that we have. It's all about excellent ideas developed or delivered by excellent people. So I will not take a lot of time in this slide, but I think I just want to emphasize one point, that as of the calls 24, we move from giving equal value from the idea and the PI to give more emphasis to the idea, and just the panels make sure that the PI as a track record that gives assurance that the idea is going to be delivered. Why was this done? Is because there is a big tendency to look for a lot of indicators, bibliometrics, and then there are people that have a lot of value, but they do not have some bibliometrics. So what the Scientific Council wanted to do was to be inclusive and to make sure that people had the opportunity to make clear what were their research achievements, how are they relevant for what they want to deliver within the project they are proposing, and also provide them the opportunity to give context why those research achievements were achieved. So next one, please. Then we will talk about eligibility. Next one, please. Okay, then. So we, when you submit a proposal, you obviously have to make sure that you are eligible, because not all this effort thinking that, okay, I qualify as a starter, and in fact, you are outside the eligibility window. What we do measure this eligibility window in relation to the first year of the call you are applying, and then you have your eligibility being counted that manner. There are some possibilities to extend the eligibility window. This is related with some events, life events, like having kids or being seriously sick, or because this is related also the career you choose. So you have the possibility to extend those eligibility windows to be able to apply to some of those schemes. And then, of course, if you are resubmitting the proposal, you also have to respect when you are resubmitting, to make sure that you are within the resubmission restrictions. So I will not spend more time in this slide telling you about this. Instead, I will tell you about the submission restrictions when I talk about the evaluation of our proposals. What you see here as also an eligibility condition is the time that you need to dedicate to each scheme you are applied to, as well as the 50% time in Europe, in case, for example, you keep your double affiliation, so the 50%. Okay, then next slide. So it was funny because we just heard, I think, Oswald telling that I wait towards the end of the eligibility window. Maybe it was not Oswald, to apply. So what we want to show you here in this slide is that most of the people do apply towards the end of the eligibility window, because we think people believe they are more successful than when they apply towards the end of the eligibility window. What this graph shows you is that the success rate of your application is to large extent decoupled to the time, the moment you submit your application in relation to the time window. This just means that the panels are really very much aware when they are judging people of what is their position in terms of career development, and they obviously will not compare the achievements of a person that is at the beginning of the eligibility window is different from a person that is towards the end, and this is taken into account, which reflects on the more or less same success rate. So you see the same phenomena for COC. People tend to apply when they are also towards the end of the eligibility window. Of course, this is a strategic decision by the applicant, but it might be that if you wait too much, when you resubmit, depending on the scores you had or the outcome of the evaluation, that you are no longer eligible in the window where you initially apply. So next slide, please. So we just want to tell you about the future. So those are the current eligibility windows we have, but the Scientific Council already decided. Of course, it is not yet in the work program. This is going to be in principle in the work program 27. Those eligibility windows are going to be changed. So they are both going to have a duration of 10 years. So a starter is somebody that the eligibility window starts counting from the moment you defend successfully your PhD up to 10 years period, while a COC, it will have also a time window of 10 years but it's between 5 and 15 years after you have defended your PhD. Again, the same criteria that you can apply for extending the eligibility are the same. They remain in force. The only particularity now that you have here is that if you apply for a starter and you still remain being eligible to be a starter, you can only have one grant in each eligibility window. Next slide. Okay, evaluation process. How do we evaluate proposals? Next one. So I'm going to tell you about evaluation process. You already have heard somebody telling it's important how you write your proposal. It's important that you present the proposal to people that they might be not directly in your field of research. This is something extremely important and is reflected in the way the proposal must be put together. So in a nutshell, submission, to submit a proposal, you have to have three components present. So you have the administrative forms, and there you will talk about the budget and the resources you need to implement your project. You have part one, where you are going to talk about your idea. What are the objectives of your project, and what is the overall approach or research strategy. You don't have a lot of space to tell this. You have 5 pages where you want to make the panel willing to see more. And so at that time, part one, you have the 5 pages to address what I just mentioned. And in addition, you also have to write your CV plus the track record that can have a maximum of 4 pages. Part two, it's the real scientific proposal. It decreased now, initially at 14 pages, now 7 pages for the regular individual schemes and 10 pages for synergy, because you need really additional space to talk about the synergy of this type of scheme. And there you have to tell everything about implementation of your project, the methodology. So, and it will be at this point in time that you are going to judge feasibility. You're going to see what is the risk, how this risk is assessed, what are the mitigating measures that you put in place. I think an important piece of advice here about the mitigating measures is quite often we see, and panels see this as well, when the mitigating measures are put forward, they are put there to decrease risk, and sometimes this also results in decreasing the level of ambition of the project. So you have to be careful when you write the proposal to make sure that this is not there. Host institution letter, this question was already asked, and the answer is yes. You already need to have a support letter from the host institution. You are not yet employed by the host institution, but you already need to have this support letter. We just heard Oswald telling that he did have this support letter, and in the end, he ended up being employed with another host institution because of the portability of the grant. So the host institution is involved in the process in the sense of supporting all the administrative part, the budget, and so on. But they need to have a commitment for the future if the grant is receiving funding, that they will indeed employ you during the duration of the grant. Then there are other additional documents that you need to provide to justify, for example, extensions or things related with ethics, as we just heard, or things related with security issues. Yeah, next slide. So this process, when you write the proposal, you have to write the proposal entirely. So you have to write the part one and the part two, but you do this as a function of who is evaluating your proposal. So we have 2 steps to evaluate individual grants. We have at step 1, only one part of the proposal is going to be read, is the part 1. And your CV and track record. It's based on this that the panel members that are in the field of the proposal, but they might not be experts themselves, they are going to make the assessment of this proposal, they work in isolation, and once this is complete, they come to Brussels and they discuss with the panel the proposal. During this discussion, there is an outcome, and they will then sort out the proposals in terms of the quality. So now you see some letters, and those letters are associated to the quality of the proposal. So if they decide that the proposal does not have quality, they give it a C. And they just say the idea is not original, is weak, the applicant does not have what it takes to deliver. So because of that, and because we don't want that the system is clogged with those weak proposals, these proposals have a submission penalty of 2 years. So it is then considered that substantial time is needed for the PI to improve the track record and to come again and submit the proposals. Then we have proposals that are in between. Either the idea, in principle, the idea is not so well developed. It is considered that there is some quality, but the proposal is not ready to be further assessed. There is also a penalty in terms of a resubmission. Those proposals need to stay 1 year out of the system, and then they can resubmit the proposal. And then there is all set of proposals that have the quality to pass to step 2. But because there is a limited number of proposals that can move to step 2, we define recently proposals that have the quality will not have any penalty in terms of coming and resubmitting, but considering all the proposals that are in the same basket are less exciting than the proposals that the panel finally decides to move to step 2. There is a maximum of 44 proposals that can move to step 2. At step 2, then the whole proposal is going to be read, part 1, part 2, the resources, the time commitment. At that time, the panel members read the proposal. They always act as generalists, but there is also a group of experts that they are called the remote reviewers. Those are the truly specialists in the field of the proposal, and they will also provide feedback. Those do not participate in the meeting in Brussels, but they provide this information to the panel to actually discuss further the proposal. Those at step 2, also the applicants, we are here in the case of individual applicants, they are also interviewed. So this interview is made online, and after the interview, there is a discussion, and finally the proposals are ranked. Either the proposals that have no quality, and we give it a B proposal, then we say that those proposals are not mature enough to receive funding, and then we rank all the A proposals and we give the funds as we have them available in the panel. In both, at the end of each step, we always provide feedback to the applicants. It means that they receive all the reviews that were completed, as well as a short comment that we call it in our jargon, the panel comment. And why is this? Is because often panel members have different appreciation on the proposal, and what needs to be communicated is the outcome and the reasons why the panel decide in one way or the other. Okay, then this is the process for evaluating individual reviews, and then this is the process to evaluate synergy grants. Here we have 3 steps, but again, when you submit the proposal is submitted entirely complete at once, but you have 3 steps to evaluate that. We have step 1, where we have a big panel. There is no panel associated, but we have a panel with around 100 people. They read the proposals, of course, the ones that are closest to their field of expertise, and then only the chairs and vice chairs come to Brussels and take a decision. So let's say that the step 1 is a kind of a triage step, and a maximum of 7 times the call budget can pass to step 2. At that time, again, we have panel members and remote reviewers reading the proposals, and the panels are at that moment formed in a dynamic manner. Each call can result in having different panels with different configurations, and then the decision is taken. What are the proposals that will go to step 3? At step 3, we will interview the group of PIs coming to Brussels. At that time, the interviews are in presence, and then after that, the decision is taken and the proposal is evaluated. The submission penalties here is at step 1 if you have a B, you are also 1 year out. If you have a C, you are 2 years out. There are no more submission restrictions throughout the process. Next slide, please. Okay, then this just gives you very briefly, those are all the panels we have. So we try to divide all the all fields of science considering the domains, and we, the Scientific Council, decide to create those panels to address those proposals. So this is the structure that is used, as I said, for the starters, the consolidators, and the advanced. While for synergy, the panels are created dynamically and are different from call to call. Jackson, back to you.
Thank you very much. I'm aware of time, so I want to ask as quickly or shortly as possible to give time to our grantees, and then to also cede some time to the Q&A. I personally can stay beyond our hour and a half, advertised time, but I know with all of our friends in Europe, I really don't want to keep you. So my apologies for the brevity, but I'll just jump right in. Sven Oliver, if I may, some of the earlier slides in this session were mentioning, in remarks from Telma, were mentioning the eligibility window. Did you apply towards the end of yours for your corresponding grant? And was it a coincidence? Was it strategic? What's your perspective on the eligibility window?
Yeah, so in my case, I actually was encouraged by the university to consider applying still for the consolidator grant at the time. I think I would have applied the next year for the advanced grant had I not considered or finished the application at the time. I mean, judging from the numbers, it doesn't seem to change the success rate. But at the time, I was ready and want to use the opportunity to be considered for the consolidator grant. And the submission process and the preparation of the grant is relatively straightforward, as was just described. It got even easier over time now, I guess, compared to the past. So I think it's also relatively clear in putting together the application such that it can be done within, I think, a year at the latest, but even shorter time if you have a clear idea of what you'd like to do.
Well, you may have answered my next question, and so I'd like to ask both of you if you could just summarize your impression of the complexity. I think we'll get into tips and tricks, but just as a short response, is it highly complex? Are there certain sort of must-dos that you'd recommend prospective applicants? I might actually interject quickly with a small remark or two. I think Jonas had mentioned sort of the administrative aspects of part of this, and I think there's a lot of very small things to be aware of that at certain points, either in the guide to applicants or in webinars like these, someone might mention once, but it's very easy to gloss over. For example, Telma can correct me if I'm wrong, but for a lot of the Pillar 2 consortia-based calls, the deadline is 5:00 p.m. Brussels time. And if you're in the Americas, you might just sort of be used to more of a culture of 11:59 p.m. Eastern or close of business local time, wherever you are. And if you're sort of really waiting on a last day update, by breakfast, you've already lost your submission window. So a common piece of advice I've heard is that, again, correct me anyone if I'm wrong, but you can always, whatever your most recent draft is, that's saved. So that will automatically sort of be submitted if you don't make further updates. So you're encouraged, if you're a sort of last minute person, or if you're really waiting on some final things in the days or weeks prior, just have your best current version so that if you get caught up in that last day or two, you have something. And then from what I understand, the submission system will simply cut off any additional pages. So you saw Telma's slides that list the page limit corresponding to each grant, and you may think because it didn't kick back or send you an error message that it accepted your additional page, and the reviewer will, look at your extra paragraph or two. But frankly, the system strips that, and the reviewer will see an incomplete document, and your sentence will be cut off, mid paragraph. So please do keep in mind the strict page limit requirements and things like that. But I would like to ask both of you just how you see the complexity and what you would want a prospective applicant to know with that regard. I think coming from the US and Canada, a lot of people are used to more national schemes and commonalities and certain perspectives. So how would you encourage someone to apply for a European proposal if it's their first time? Thank you. Either one of you, Jonas, if you'd like to share.
Yeah, I certainly, as far as the window and strategic thinking, that never entered my mind, partly because I was going for an advanced, I suppose. And I do think, as I said, that it's important to have administrative support with respect to the budget, with respect to ethical issues and such. But I do think that getting the concept and getting part one of the proposal right is really the big challenge, and I'm not sure that yeah, it's the big challenge, and I think you should have people read it and get feedback on it. I want to reiterate something Sven Oliver said earlier, which is that at least from where I sat on the panel that approved my project, there were no political scientists working in my domain. There were, as Thelma has explained, there were externals who had written comments, but clearly, or I assumed all along that the key is to appeal to this group of X number of social scientists who need to get excited about this in some way or another, whether or not they know all of the literature. So to me that really, or yeah, that as perhaps especially for an advanced, because in the advanced there is no interview. So if you can't get your ideas across to or at least there wasn't when I did it, if you can't get your ideas across in a pretty succinct way to a group of people who are working across social sciences, then you're in trouble, I think.
Maybe the one addition. Sorry.
Please.
Yeah, maybe the one addition I can make in terms of the submission process. Given where you would like to host the project, right? Your domestic constraints on what exactly can be funded or what the budget numbers you can say are for personnel might be different, right? So that changes according to where you would like to implement the project. Postdoc costs differently in Germany compared to France or Belgium, right? Or doctoral student has different funding requirements. So this is where the host institution contact is really important to figure that out and to make projections, into the future of what the cost will be, because you have to take into account of inflation, etc. So this is, I think, an important element of trying to make sure that the host institution has backs your proposal and has somebody that can work with you. And other than that, I think the part two, part one distinction. Part one is really sort of to convince that non-specialist audience and to get that panel excited about your proposal, that you're really sort of trying to do something that breaks some existing frontiers. Part two now is going towards also specialized reviewers that are from your field. So you do want to make sure that in the part two, you also talk really to those who know what you are proposing. And I think that's also was quite useful. Also, the recommendation that I got, that you want to make sure that you cover essentially both the general audience, but also then your expert reviewers who remotely review the proposal. And that can be sort of signaled also in part two of the proposal.
Thank you both. Maybe with an eye on the time, Thelma, we'll continue. I might have one more question during the next pause, and then we'll try to see if we can wrap up the slides and get to the Q&A. And if either of the grantees wish to comment on some of the written questions as they are now, you're welcome to do that as Thelma presents. But I think I'll have one or two more questions for you before we turn to the Q&A. So thank you, Thelma.
Okay, then could you please advance? Okay, then some tips and tricks. But I think this is already, so I will go very fast here because this was already mentioned by Stephen. It is very important how you write the proposal, because who is actually evaluating the proposal? Part B1, quite often we have the question, how do I start writing my proposal? Do I start with part B1 or part 1 or part 2? We normally, our advice is, I think you should start with part 2, where you know exactly what you want to do, and you already think about all the risks, all the mitigating measures, and then you have to write it in a way that a generalist will be intrigued and wanted to see how you are going to deliver the proposal. So normally that's the advice we give. So part 1 and part 2 should be written for a different set of people. We also change, and this is the first time we actually changed the structure of the proposal is now in work program 26. We have seen there was a lot of repetition between part B1 and part B2. This is now being changed to make sure that the part 1, where it's now shorter, you only have 5 pages, that you really tell everything about the idea, how ambitious it is, what is your overall research strategy. And once you can communicate this and make the panel and the panel member curious to see the rest, then you impress with all the details in terms of the implementation. And at that time, you should also the panel also evaluates the feasibility. So this is a change in comparison with the past, but we think this is going to be to help the panels taking risk and passing proposals that are more risky to step two. So this is what we think it's important at when preparing a proposal. Jackson, you want to stop, or do you want me to continue?
I might just ask if either grantee wrote in a certain order strategically to sort of build up in the order that Telma mentioned. So Jonas, if you happen to recall, was there a order you wrote in, and was it helpful to you?
Well, I thought, but I guess I didn't. I think what Telma said makes very good sense in terms of the sequence of writing. But I would again emphasize that I think that the sort of the idea which is going to be articulated in part one comes first. But maybe the writing of part one follows after the writing of part two. I think that's right. But there's something part one-ish that needs to be on the table before you can start writing part two, I think.
So I don't know if you have a thought, but I think
maybe that's due to the different nature of how it was in the past. In the past, part two was an extended part one.
Yeah.
So some of the elements were the same, and so at that point it made sense to start from maybe part two and then condense that to a general audience. I think now it's a little bit different because part one is really about pitching the project, and part two is more about the implementation. So if I had this now, if I applied now to a grant, I would maybe start with part one and then maybe with part two in this particular order, given what Jonas just emphasized, that it's really about the idea first and then the details and the technical aspects and implementation second. But it might be different by field and by personal preference.
Thank you. I think Telma, we'll start to close out with some more slides, and then we'll jump to some questions. I'll advance.
Yes. Okay. Then yeah, it's good. Maybe I jump a couple of slides. Maybe only this one here very rapidly. There are also some kind of issues that we have problems communicating, and then people get it in the way that it should not be. One of the things is that there are out there in the community, there is a belief that some panels are more successful than other panels. This is not so, because the budget of the panel is allocated as a function of the demand. So probably people, when they look into the list of the projects that we fund, they say, oh, but there are so many projects in this field of research, and this is assigned to this panel. For sure, this panel is more successful. No, it just means that this panel had many more proposals and the corresponding budget, so that the success rate is the same. Also, there is this idea that the publication record is the decisive element in assessing the quality of the PI. This is not so. OST institution is definitely not an evaluation criteria. This is all about you and your idea being in a place where you can deliver this idea. Success rate is not linked to academic age and the panel descriptors, because this is the way panels are communicated in terms of their expertise coverage. Those panel descriptors do not represent any priority for us. So, because we are bottom up, as we already mentioned. Next slide, please. So just some figures in terms of the participation. This just shows you the nationalities of the applicants proposing here. Just you just see that there are some nationalities that are proposing more than others. It's just to give you an idea about how many Americans, in this case is the US, are actually coming to our program. But in the next slide, you will see that 8% of all our ERC grants are coming from researchers that do not have a EU or an associated country nationality. So you see, so if you look specifically in this table, you have 448 grants that were given to US nationals. It means that those are individual grants. It means that these people were indeed employed during the time they were developing their research by an European university or OST institution, or OST institution in an associated country. So, but of course, as I said, they could also keep their affiliation in the United States, but they had to stay 50% of their time in Europe. So if we go to the next slide, just shows you here, this is a scheme, this is the synergy of 2024, and this is the scheme where you do not need to move to Europe to develop your research. What this slide shows you here is that in the call 24, we have funded 57 proposals, and approximately in 20% of those proposals, there was a partner from the US. So you see the success rate, the average, and Americans, they are slightly above the success rate, the average success rate. So next slide, please. Some final messages. So don't exclude yourself from participating in the calls. Very, very important is, if you fail, try again, because you go through a process. And what we see is that proposals that are resubmitted, they have a much higher success rate than others. It just means that you get a lot of feedback from scientists that are themselves leaders in the field, and this whole process results in improving your proposal significantly. So if you don't succeed first time, don't quit, go again and try it once more. Last slide to finish this. We have been talking about applying to ERC. It means you are then in the driving seat. But if you want to profit from ERC funds, you don't have to start being in the driving seat. You can, for example, apply to work in teams that are funded by the ERC. And in this process, EURAXESS helps you a lot, because in their portal, they do publish a list of vacancies that are in teams funded by ERC. And should you find a project or a team where you would like to be, the thing you have to do, you have to apply to this vacancy and go through the process, and eventually you might get the position. Another possibility to get involved and profit from the funds of ERC is through the implementing arrangements. We do have, ERC has 2 implementing arrangements with Canada and the US. And in this process, ERC asks all our grantees with running grants that don't terminate with less than 18 months, that they still have some time to go, if they are interested to host people from those 2 countries, Canada or US. We also have implementing agreements with other countries. And after that, those lists are published. And you need to go to those websites of those agencies with whom we have signed our agreement. For example, in the United States is the National Science Foundation. You check if you are eligible, and then you get a list of people that you could visit. You engage in discussing how your stay in Europe and working with this team should be, and after that you submit a proposal to the NSF, and after being evaluated, your salary and your travel costs are actually covered. So this is yet another way that you can make use of the ERC funding opportunities. Then the last slide, we're not going to, just to show that this year are indicated many sources of information, because in the Q&A people were asking, do you have this information published? Yes, we have plenty of of information. We have something that is, I think, extremely important for you. We have what we call ERC classes. It just if one of us, a scientific officer, tell you explaining how the evaluation process is going, how you get started with a proposal and so on. So it's very easy to understand, and I recommend that you look into our website and you look to all the information available. I think that's it. Maybe only the calendar that you can leave there in the screen, that people see that most of our calls are still open, because the submission deadline is still somewhere in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Telma. As I said, everyone will we'll update the website later today with the PDF slides at the very least, and then in the next day or two we'll have the recording up. I will leave up just for a moment the contact information and all the social media channels of the ERC, and I would highly encourage people to visit that YouTube playlist that you mentioned called ERC Classes. So with this, we are more or less at time, but I want to do everything we can to address any and all pending questions. So I don't know if I can invite the three of you to just read in the Q&A box questions that you think you might like to address, and then at that point, you're more than encouraged just to unmute and address any of these answers. And then I will also, in the background, be trying to type out some responses. But I do think one thing that might answer several questions at once is for people to look up the list of EU member states and then Horizon Europe associated countries. And by associated countries, in this case, we're talking about countries that are fully associated to Horizon Europe. So I think I wrote in a previous answer in the chat, Canada, New Zealand, and South Korea are associated to Pillar 2 only, meaning they're considered third countries, just like the rest of the continents when it comes to ERC grants. But Telma laid out some very good ways to get involved, like joining a grantee on their team, being a synergy grant PI. One of those 2, 3, or 4 PIs can be based outside of Europe. So there really are, or just moving to Europe on any of the other grants. So there are opportunities to be involved if you're from those 3 countries. But if you're from anywhere else in the world, regardless of where you live, what your passport is, you can go to Europe on any and all of these grants. So I might do my best just to try to start with some of the top questions, the oldest questions that I've seen. There's a lot of interest from Canada, partly because a little over a year ago, Canada associated to Pillar 2 for these top-down collaborative calls. Of course, this doesn't involve the ERC or Pillar 1. So Telma, maybe you could just take this question on Canadian researchers who are interested in grants. Will they get funding in the synergy grants by the very nature of one PI being based outside of Europe?
Sorry. So yes, indeed. If you apply for a synergy grant, yes, you, as I said, you stay where you are in your host institution, and then you can collaborate with your group of PIs that are in Europe or in an associated country. One of the 4 can be from outside the EU or associated country. So you are funded exactly in the same manner as if you were in Europe.
Meaning it's not, the money does not pass through any of the European partner institutions. It goes straight to the Canadian institution.
Exactly.
That answers multiple questions that we've seen. So thank you.